Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's webinar, Simplify and Enhance HR Processes with SAP SuccessFactors Employee Central, hosted by SAP Insider and sponsored by Illumiti. My name is Steve Paul. I'm your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and our presenters. Later in the program, we'll ask for your feedback. You can participate in our Q&A session by asking questions about the information presented in this webinar at any time. Just type your question into the text box located at the bottom left of our console and then click the Submit Question button. We'll answer as many questions as time permits after our presentation. Slides will advance automatically throughout the event, and you can download a PDF copy of our presentation by clicking on the Download Slide link in the resource box on the bottom left of our console. At this time, we recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. And if you're experiencing any technical problems, please visit our webinar help guide by clicking on the Help icon on the bottom right of our console. If slides are not advancing, please press the F5 key on your keyboard to refresh your browser. And now on to the presentation, Simplify and Enhance HR Processes with SAP SuccessFactors Employee Central. Discussing today's topic will be Rebecca Murray, Managing Partner, Cultivate Consulting, Inc., and Megan Fife, Education Consultant with SAP Education. First, we'll hear from Rebecca. Hello, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you everyone for attending today. We have a few learning objectives for today's session. First, we'll be taking a look at what is SAP SuccessFactors Employee Central and what does it entail. Then we'll be looking at how Employee Central can be used to drive good, clean, valid employee data. We'll be exploring the benefits of having a global template with localized capabilities. And we'll end with how self-service functionality and workflows can ease the data change process for organizations. So looking first at what is SAP SuccessFactors. SAP SuccessFactors is a comprehensive HCM, human capital management solution that allows you to manage your total workforce and tackle the ever-increasing workforce complexities. It's scalable and flexible, which means that as you grow and change, or if you're large or small, the solution will adjust to meet the needs of your organization. So a very robust solution with a lot of flexibility built in. Let's take a look now at what exactly is offered in the SuccessFactors solution. If you look at this particular graphic, you can see that there are three key breakouts for the SuccessFactors solution: human capital analytics, talent management, and core HR. Talent management covers everything from recruiting to onboarding, performance and goals, succession and development, really everything that you would need to grow and cultivate your employees from the moment they engage with your organization until they leave your organization. So capturing the full employee life cycle of growth and development. Core HR is what we'll be looking at today, and that encompasses everything from employee record keeping, organizational management, payroll, the capabilities to have a shared service center, time and attendance capabilities, and benefits functionality. So really everything that you would need to have a core HRIS solution for your organization. Back there at the top, we've got human capital analytics. The analytics portion of our solution allows you not just to report on the data that's in the system, but to get good, meaningful data out of the system. So not just getting a list of employees who have terminated, but getting reasons as to why they've terminated, or helping you to identify trends if people are leaving from a certain division or department more so than other divisions or departments. So taking the concept of reporting one step further and giving you an actual analysis of the data that's already in your system. And of course, the entire solution is supported through social capabilities with collaborative work environments, mobile functionality, intelligent services, and all of this interlaced with best practices to help you have a system and a solution that meets your organization's needs. So today we'll be looking at the core HR portion of our solution. It is called Employee Central. You may hear it abbreviated EC for shorthand. And Employee Central offers for us effective dated employee records, which means that we keep track of not just an employee's current state or status within the system, but where they've been in our organization from the time they joined our company. So we keep track of hire records and every change that is applied to the employee until they leave the organization. Every job change, every location change, every pay change, which means from a reporting standpoint, you're not just reporting on the employee today, but you can report on historical records for your employees over a period of time. We also offer organizational management capabilities, so the ability to group your employees into divisions and departments and to have reporting structures built along the way. We have a very robust functionality built in for self-services for both managers and employees, the ability for managers and employees to go in and take action on their own data, and for managers also to be able to run and execute reports within the system. Megan will be speaking about that a little bit more in today's webinar. And finally, Employee Central offers functionality for time, payroll, and benefits, so really giving you a complete solution all within one system. On this next slide, we have a screenshot of the Employee Central system. As you can see, it's a web-based solution, highly visual, with an easy-to-use navigation bar across the top, and with point-and-click functionality built into the solution. So we can take simplified HR processes and put them into this web-based solution to make them readily accessible for your end users. Employee Central is highly configurable, which means that we can tailor the solution to meet your business needs without having to go through much lengthy development or coding that you may be used to with some previous solutions. It has the ability to be template-based, and these templates can serve as guides for best practices. And within this solution, we can do the configuration to meet your company's specific needs. Employee Central supports a global template with localized capabilities built in. Megan's going to speak about this a little bit later today in the webinar, but it means that if you're a global organization, we offer the ability to gather data across the board for your employees without sacrificing any of the local capabilities or reporting needs that you may have to meet compliance requirements. The solution itself supports a series of languages, over 40 different languages, and compliance over 77 different countries. The self-service functionality for managers and employees is extremely robust and yet user-friendly. And self-service can be guided and overseen through a series of workflow notifications. In terms of security and data access, everything is controlled dynamically using role-based permissions, which means that when a user accesses the system, the solution recognizes who they are and presents to them the portions of the system that they should have access to. Here's a snapshot of some of the functionality that's available within the SAP SuccessFactors Employee Central solution. Broken up into 4 main areas, we have HR transactions, position management, time management, reporting, and compliance. Underneath HR transactions, we already talked a little bit about effective date. That's the ability to store multiple records over a period of time for an employee, which means you get historical reporting and not just top-of-stack data. We have employee self-services, manager self-services, new hire processes, the ability to do changes such as transfers, promotions, job changes, terminations, retirements, all using guided processes within the solution. We also have the ability to do batch assignments and mass updates. On the position management side, we have the ability to work with succession management to make sure that all of your key positions are always filled and to make sure that there's a bench behind key positions so that you'll never be left with a vacancy unexpectedly. We also have the ability to track vacancies as they occur on particular teams and to use those vacancies when helping source requisitions to drive candidates to fill those vacancies. On the time management side, we offer the ability for employees and managers to enter time into the solution, to make leave requests and time off requests, to do those approvals for those requests either in the system or through your mobile device so that it's easy and accessible for your team members. We keep track of work schedules, holiday calendars, timesheets, and then HR admins and managers are able to run and pull reports across the board for all of those different pieces. On the reporting and compliance side, we have a wealth and a large library of standard reports that are available, whether they're global reports for things like headcount and termination and new hires, or they're local specific reports to help meet compliance needs. There's a library full of reports ready for you to be able to run. And not only can you use the reports from our library, but you can also use our standard tools to create your own. And sometimes when I say that, people have the idea that it will take a while or become quite an exercise to create your own report, but we actually have guided tools that are web-based to help you create those reports. So creating a report within our system is not necessarily a lengthy exercise that involves code and a specialist. It's something available right within our web-based solution, so easy and accessible for all. Okay. Now that we've had a view of the basics of SuccessFactors Employee Central, let's take a look at how the solution can help us have clean and valid employee data within our HRIS system. You might be wondering, why do we need good HR data? The first answer that comes to mind is because we need to be able to pay people, and we want to be able to pay them the correct amount. But that's kind of the old way of thinking. That's the first base necessity. As we're moving into a data-driven society, HR departments are becoming more and more important in the business of an organization and in the decision-making process. And so HR partners are being moved into and seen in a more strategic light. And they're often called upon to give input, to provide information, to provide reports about employees, about productivity, about turnover, about key positions. And in order to be able to meet those needs, you need to have data to help support it. So good, clean data is needed to help you be more strategic in your role, to help you create and deliver reports, to meet the needs of your leadership teams, as well as any local compliance demands that may be in your location. And then, of course, to head off any issues that may come about as a result of having bad data. So underestimating staffing needs or overestimating staffing needs, running a payroll with incorrect amounts, hiring someone and not getting all of their information so that you're not able to send them onboarding forms or to process their pay because the national ID is missing. For all these reasons, we need to have good, clean data within our HRIS solution. As you can see here from this graphic, this is some information about what are the consequences of having missing or dirty data. And this came from a web blog. On the left-hand side, you can see that having poor data is the #1 reason why 40% of all business initiatives fail. So this isn't specific to HR, this is organization-wide, but certainly HR plays a large role in this because our largest resources, for the most part, are our employee bases. So 40% of initiatives not reaching their targets is due to poor data quality. And on the right-hand side, you can see that 2/3 of organizations have analysts that spend the majority of their time doing data-related tasks, such as data entry and data cleanup, instead of having them perform analytically based tasks, which means you're just doing data entry and data retrieval and not necessarily looking at that data and identifying trends and getting good results or drawing conclusions from that information. And wouldn't it be nice if you worked in HR and instead of spending your time doing data entry and data cleanup, you could actually be running reports, generating data, predicting outcomes, and helping to be a more strategic partner within your organization. And that's where Employee Central is going to come into play, because our solution can help you do that. There are a few different things that we have built into the system that helps you collect good, clean data, and that helps verify it and validate it as it's being entered into the system. So a whole series of checks and balances. And as a customer, you determine when we do the system setup where you want these checks and balances to come into play. The easiest thing that we can do is take a data field and mark it as required. If you're sitting in the HR space and you've ever been involved with processing payroll, you have most likely run into a scenario where you've tried to process payroll for an employee who is a new hire whose data is incomplete. Maybe you're missing address information. Maybe you're missing a national ID. But it's payday and you need to pay that employee and you don't have all of their information. Marking fields as required will help ensure that whoever is doing that data entry is filling in those minimum pieces of data in order to process pay, so that you won't be stuck in a scenario where you've got incomplete information for an employee. Some of the other ways that Employee Central helps drive good data is by having specific field types. So that for a phone number field, we're looking for numbers. For a date field, we're looking for dates. And for a text field, we're looking for text. We can also build format validation into the system to make sure that an entry meets certain formatting guidelines, the most popular being around national IDs, telephone, email addresses, those types of things. So that never again will you pull a report and look at information and say, how did this value even get in there? That doesn't make sense for this field. We also have the ability within the solution to pre-populate data fields for an employee's record, or to propagate information from one section of the system to another. If we know that we're hiring someone into a particular job, and that job has certain characteristics, such as a salary grade, or number of hours that they work per week, or type of holiday calendar that's associated with that job, and the location where the employee will be working, the solution will populate that information for us. So we don't have to rely on someone to manually key in those values and assign them to the employee. The system will take care of that for us and validate them along the way. We also have the ability to have drop-down lists throughout the system. So areas where you know you have a set list of expected results or expected values for a data field, instead of having someone type them in manually, you can give them a drop-down list. And that means that there will be consistency for those field values across the organization. And when you pull a report and you look at data in one location versus another, those values are going to be the same. I can't tell you how many times I've helped customers move to our system, and when looking at their data that they're converting over, we see things like states or provinces. Some are typed out longhand. Some have shortcuts. Some have different capital letters here and different capital letters there. This solution is going to allow you to have a consistent format across the board. Another thing that we're able to do within Employee Central is to incorporate business rules throughout the solution. And business rules help us default in values and validate fields that are populated. So if we want to restrict, for example, pay increases to not go above a certain percentage without additional approvals, we can build those rules in the system. And then when a manager goes and executes a manager self-service transaction for a team member's increase, the system will validate the information that he or she is inputting. So I know automatically as an HR representative, when I get an approval, it's going to be within the guidelines that we have already set. And not only that, but for each and every data change that we make for an employee within the system, we not only record the change, but a reason why the change has been made. And that is so that we can report on those reasons. So not only do our termination reports list out everyone who has left, but the reason why they left. And we can group those people together to help identify trends. And finally, system administrators receive system alerts when there's bad or inconsistent data. So that if for some reason bad data has been put into the system and it wasn't caught, an HR administrator is going to have a tile on their homepage that identifies areas where there are inconsistencies so that they can be addressed. What does that look like in our system? Well, here's just a snapshot of an employee's basic record, personal information. This is Sid Morton. He's a sales director. And you can see that we have different data tiles containing some of his personal information. On the top left-hand corner, you can see that we have a national ID card assigned to Sid. And his national ID card type was pulled from a list of card types so that there's no free entry there. Someone didn't type in SSN or social number or SOCH. Social Security number appears for everyone in the United States who has a national ID card. And just to the right of that, under the actual national ID, that field is formatted to allow 3 digits, 2 digits, and then 4 digits. If we were to put in one too many or one too few or format it differently, the system would ask us to correct that entry. The same holds true with the address, which appears just below that tile. This particular address is formatted for a location in the United States, for Atlanta, Georgia. And because this particular employee is in the United States, the system knew to prompt for city, state, and zip code, as opposed to maybe province, region, or district like we would see with other countries. So that the address format for this particular employee ensures that we collect the correct data values for this employee. On the right-hand side, you can see we have some examples of required fields, the first being first name. And you can see I skipped over that one, and the system prompted me to go back and fill it in so that I'm not saving this new hire record with holes or with inconsistencies. And then underneath that, you can see some examples of drop-down lists for things like suffix, gender, so that I'm not typing in junior or second or M for male versus, male spelled all the way out, that the data values I input into the system will be consistent across the board. And those are some examples of how Employee Central helps us gather good, clean, consistent data within the system. And now I'm going to pass things over to Megan, who's going to walk us through the global template concept. Megan?
Thank you, Rebecca. So when we're talking about defining a global template, we're talking about just that, which is information that is defined on behalf of all employees, regardless of where they are located. This really allows us to put all of the appropriate data that is needed for all employees within the same place. So first name will be first name or the equivalent across the globe, so that when we need to run a report, we can gather data from that place and we know we have it for everyone in the system. Examples of this are last name, job title, salary, marital status. All of those different types of fields can be part of the global template. We call this the global template because it's the minimum standard of data that we want to collect and report on for employees. So this is information that we know we want to have across the board for all employees. Now, just because this information is captured within the same place, that doesn't mean we can have some differences depending on where you are in the world. So those differences include being able to translate this information into local languages. So not only would the label you see be translated into the local language, but also the value you input could be translated as well if that's necessary. The system also supports local currencies as well as country-specific number and date formats. So for example, if you were to choose English UK in the system would display a date having the day as the leading number, so it would be in day, month, year format. However, if you were to choose English US, the system would automatically switch those dates to be in month, day, year format. So not only do those local languages translate the data, it also provides country-specific attributes as well for this information. Some of the benefits of a global template is talking again about that good data. So all of these fields can be required, formatted, and validated the same for all employees across the board. So you can mark fields as mandatory for ones that you need for global reporting. These fields cannot be skipped, which leads to a lack of missing data. So that way you have to fill in that field before that record can be saved. And no incorrect or missing data means no missed paychecks for newly hired employees. We can also run reports off of all of this data because we know it's stored in the same place. So report examples can include global headcounts or global salary and compensation reports. If you need to know what department that employee belongs to, what legal entity they belong to, what their first name is, what their employee ID, you can rest assured that all of that information is stored in the same place and is coming in for all of the employees. Now you may be saying to yourself, well, my company is just run out of one country. Why is it important that I define a global template? The reason is you want to make sure that all of your data is consistent across the board for your organization. You still want to make sure that everybody is seeing the same basic fields that you need to report on. Also, you want to make sure that those are being filled out correctly and everybody is having the correct information for themselves. Also, at some point, your organization may expand and you may introduce other countries. At that point, you still have this global template designed, but then you can allow for additional fields for those new employees. So when we talk about those additional fields for new employees, we're talking about localization. Now, localization can occur on two levels. One way is to take certain data for employees and change it slightly depending on where they are. One example would be national ID. So we do require a national ID for all employees in the system. However, this national ID look and feel can be slightly different. So we saw that Rebecca showed us a national ID card for United States. Social Security was Social Security number was the only option that you could choose from that drop-down list because that employee was in the USA. And also the number format and allowing only numbers was relevant to that specific national ID. Now for Germany, the national ID card type might be completely different, and that format may allow for letters and numbers. So this is localization across different countries. The same is true for address. So certain addresses, like for United States, may have an address 1, address 2, city, state, and zip code field, whereas an address for Canada may have province and postal code instead of state and zip. So this information, even though it's being gathered across the board, can have a slightly different look and feel, that local look. Beyond localizing specific sections that all employees would see, you can also provide country-specific local templates. These can be thought of as add-on fields in addition to the global template, and it's only going to be relevant for employees that are in those countries. You may want to capture specific data only for German employees. If that's the case, then you would provide those fields on that local template. Those fields would be seen and possibly required only for employees in Germany, and everyone else would not see that information. That way you're not bogged down by fields that aren't relevant to certain employees, and those filling out the HR data wouldn't be confused by that information. These local fields are not contained in the global template, so they are separate. They're separate add-on fields. They may be used to support local compliance reports. So it may deal with demographics, local work contracts, or local job information, as well as a variety of other uses. Here on the screen, we can see examples of global fields and local fields all working together. So on the left-hand side, the fields that we have here in blue are our global fields. Again, these are going to be fields that everyone in the company would see and that everyone would be able to have information about. Now, the fields may have different labels depending on where you are, what language you have turned on, but the basic information being stored is the same. Because we chose Canada as the nationality for that employee within the global fields, we then see the fields local to Canada down below. So we see the Canada flag there, and then we see healthcare number, healthcare province, as well as some other fields. These are only fields that would be seen for Canada. So these would only be filled out for employees whose nationality is Canada. Now you can take it one step further, and you can allow for fields to be present in multiple countries and not in others. An example would be fields that are required information only for countries in North America. So you may have a field like healthcare number visible for United States employees, Mexico employees, and Canada employees, but nowhere else in the world. So again, not only can you make these country specific, but you can add the same fields to multiple countries to gather that data. And then you would be able to run reports on the North American countries and have that field information for all of those that are relevant. On the right-hand side in green here, we're showing two different examples of country-specific formats. So at the top, we see United States, and it was like the example I mentioned before. You have address 1 field, address 2 field, city, state, and zip. Now state is actually a drop-down list like what Rebecca mentioned earlier before. So rather than somebody typing in CA or typing in the full word California and having that discrepancy between data, this is a drop-down list that's predefined only with states that are in the United States. So that drop-down list is specific to the United States. And the same is true with the province field in the Canada address. So here you see the Canada address below. It has address 1, address 2, city, province, and postcode. And that province field would only be relevant to Canada. Just revisiting those terms, so we talked about globalization versus localization. Globalization are fields that can be across the globe, but there can be certain changes between different companies. This could be languages and translation into those languages, support for country standards such as time zones, currencies, and date and number formats, but still the fields will be seen across the globe. And then we have localization, which allows us to have fields that are specific only to certain countries. So you would only see certain fields for Canadian employees. And this could be used for local legal requirements, best practices, and compliance reporting. Currently, in terms of Employee Central supporting localization, we do have solutions localized for 77 countries. Now, this is something that we already deliver to our customers. So there are already country-specific fields that can be built out for 77 countries. And as Rebecca mentioned, we currently support over 40 languages, 41 to be exact, which you can pick and choose which of those languages you want to turn on and translate your data for in your system. As well, we provide over 1,500 regulatory updates and solutions annually. Now here are some examples of the 77 countries that currently have delivered localizations. Now again, these are what SuccessFactors delivers themselves, or SAP SuccessFactors. That doesn't mean to say that you can't have localizations for other countries as well. You can. You can build in localizations for other countries. Those just need to be manually created. And then for the countries listed with the graphic next to them, this includes payroll localizations as well. And we're constantly working on increasing the number of these to really allow these out-of-the-box capabilities. So that discussed the differences between global fields and localized fields and the ability to talk about the additional fields available for certain countries versus the standard template that we use for all employees across the globe. Now I want to talk a little bit about facilitating employee data changes with self-service functionality. So Rebecca introduced this topic a little bit earlier, talking about the idea of employee self-service and manager self-service, and this is something that really sets this solution apart. So as we all know, an HR system is only good as the data it contains. If you have faulty or missing information in there, then the system can't run the way that it should. However, keeping track of employee personal information and job-related information can become cumbersome and time-consuming, especially if you're doing it through a paper trail or an email chain. Then the employee would have to reach out to the local HR rep. They may have to fill out a paper form and actually go upstairs to their office and hand it in. And then the HR people are responsible for filling in that information into the system. This could allow for a lot of mistakes since employees themselves are the ones that really know the data. So what Employee Central does is allows employees and managers to actually log into the system and make their own data changes. This increases touch points with the system. Employees are more likely to log in and review their data if they're able to make their own changes. Also, this allows HR representatives to move away from the data entry tasks and focus more on a strategic HR role. Now, we know that mistakes can happen when employees go in or managers go in and make changes themselves, which is why we have allowed for guided processes, and these are known as workflows. Workflows can either create approval processes so that employees need to, or certain people in the system need to approve this change before it can go into place, or workflows can provide notification to those that need it that this information has been input in the system. So employee self-service is mainly focused on personal information. This could be address changes if an employee gets a second address or changes, they move to a different location, they can start this address change in the system. They can also update personal contact information and direct deposit or bank routing information. And really, you're not limited to just these spaces. If you wanted employees to be able to change their first name or last name or marital status, you could also set this up as well. This is highly customizable. Again, the changes are made directly in the system by the employee themselves, since they're the ones that know the information better than anyone else. This reduces the risk for errors, emails getting deleted, papers getting lost or having bad penmanship. These could all lead to errors in the system, but if the employee can put it in themselves, that's the most direct way to do it. Also, all of the mandatory fields and formatting rules that Rebecca mentioned still are in play for this scenario. So this ensures that employees fill out the entire form and that they fill it out correctly. As well, we also have the option, which is highly recommended for workflows, which can provide an approval process or simply notify a group that the change is made. That way, everyone who needs to be is aware of this change and can do additional things, even perhaps outside of the system, based on this change in information. Now, manager self-service focus more on the job and employment information side of things. This allows managers to be able to make basic changes on a team member's job or employment information. This typically refers to direct reports, but it could go as far down the chain as you would choose. They could do things like change job information, do a transfer to another location, do an increase in pay, or just a simple spot bonus. The manager would themselves log in and navigate to their direct reports information and update the information appropriately. And just for all the same reasons as employee self-service, this cuts down on errors, and all the mandatory rules are still in play. Here we have an example of some of the things that a manager could do based on manager self-service. So they could change job and compensation information, they could give spot bonuses, they could add additional employment details. They could even start the process of termination or retiring an employee. Now, all of this is highly configurable. So if you wanted managers to be able to do some of this information but not others, that's completely managed through role-based permissions. And then whatever change the manager would input could trigger a workflow. And we can see a workflow participant screen here where Nancy Nash would have to approve this change before it would be active within the system. So we call those approval or notification processes workflow notifications. So these are triggered when a proposed data change is sent into the system, and either it simply notifies people after the change occurs, or it has to approve that information. We can have different workflows depending on what information you're inputting into the system. So for a new hire process, you may simply only alert onboarding that this has occurred so that they can give the employee the right training. But for a transfer process, especially that has manager changes and HR changes, you may have multiple people that need to approve this process before it can go into play. And then the routing of workflows can also be tailored for various locations through the use of dynamic roles. So this is used to make sure that it goes to the appropriate local payroll group. So for employees that are in China, it'll go to the China payroll admin, or even the locations payroll admin, or it goes to the head of the department for which the employee belongs. So this is all based on the employee's information, who's going out and approving this information. So some of the benefits of self-services and workflows: this helps process employee data changes and cut down on errors or typos. Allows for employees and managers to initiate the changes themselves rather than them reaching out to HR and then HR having to do the data changes in the system. Just because HR doesn't do the data changes, though, doesn't mean that they can't review those changes. Proposed data changes can be reviewed and approved by HR groups, payroll groups, benefit groups, or even higher management through the use of workflows. And even while a workflow is in process, these can be rerouted to other people, delegated, and escalated as needed. The change processes are performed that allow for the tracking of actions and approvals. So when you go in and you initiate a transfer for an employee, the system knows that you are triggering a transfer and exactly what date you're triggering a transfer for. And that information is stored in the history of the system. Email exchanges and Word documents don't mark these events in the system, but having the change occur directly in the system allows for this. And again, most importantly, it takes HR away from doing simple data changes and gets them back to what they should be doing. So that was the information around globalization and employee and manager self-service. I'll go ahead and let Rebecca wrap up the session.
Thanks, Megan. So in conclusion today, we hope you enjoyed the session, and we hope that you have a good understanding about Employee Central and realize that it is a cloud-based, scalable, full HRIS solution. It can assist you with gathering and keeping good, clean data so that you can report and make analytical decisions and strategic outcomes off of this data. A global template ensures that the necessary data for your bare minimum is gathered across the board for your entire organization. This will help make sure that you have complete data for reporting. Localization helps satisfy country-specific data and compliance requirements. And again, we support more than 77 countries with out-of-the-box localizations. And finally, self-service, including the use of approval workflows, can help HR with initiating and approving employee-related data changes. And now I will turn things back over to Steve, who will run through some questions that have been input into the webinar for us.
Okay, thanks very much. Excellent presentation. Before we go on to our audience Q&A, though, we'd also like to ask our audience to please fill out a feedback form survey that is now appearing on your desktop. To complete this form, just press the Submit Answer button at the bottom of the page, and we thank you in advance for filling out this form. Your participation in our survey allows us to serve you better in the future. And now on to the Q&A. So please just submit your questions at the bottom of the console. We'll take as many as time permits. We already have a number of great questions, so why don't we get started here with William. William wants to know, what are the general guidelines on when to do a local template? Who'd like to take that?
This is Rebecca. I'll go ahead and take that. Really, the best time to do it is when you get started at the very beginning of your implementation with requirements gathering. One of the nice things about setting up that global template is that you can make sure that when you're done with your implementation, you have all the fields that you need, and you don't need to go back and add them or reformat existing fields later on down the road. This is especially helpful if you have plans to integrate to downstream or third-party systems. So if you're sending this data someplace else, it's really important to make sure that you have a concise list of the data that you need. So I recommend that this be done during the initial part of your implementation when you're doing requirements gathering.
Okay, thank you. Lana has a question here. How can Employee Central correct human error even if there are checks and balances in certain areas? For example, salaries could still be keyed in as a typo, 121K versus 122. Would like to take that.
I'll take that one. So I think that really ties in with the workflow process we discussed, especially for changes to job information and compensation information. We highly recommend that you include a workflow with an approval process so somebody is taking a look at that data to make sure it makes sense. Also, we have other things in place such as auto-population of data through business rules so that correct information as much as possible will be automatically input rather than having to manually key data in.
Great, thank you. Lucy has a question. Can you design your own form with custom fields and take it through approvals of various levels and workflow notification at each stage?
Yes, you can. Actually, the system is extremely configurable. So putting in your own fields or your own segments is completely permitted. And then, of course, having workflows incorporated with each section is permitted as well. So that's a very typical use of our system, is to take custom fields, spread them throughout, and then incorporate workflow notifications.
Okay, Eves has a question. Do the business rules include collective agreements rules?
They certainly can. We have the ability to create our own business rules within the system, and we can set them up for really any data fields within the system. So if, for example, we have an employment type or employee type that indicates that this employee is a member of a collective bargaining unit, we can certainly have business rules react differently for this employee versus someone who's not part of a collective bargaining agreement. And that may be governing things like pay changes, shift changes, location changes, etc. Business rules can certainly be set up to account for this.
Thank you. Una wants to know, is SuccessFactors Central a totally separate system from on-premise SAP?
Yes, it is completely separate. We do have the ability to have the two be integrated and to speak with each other and send data back and forth, but it is a cloud-based solution, so it resides in the cloud, and it is separate from the on-premise environment. A lot of our customers we're seeing now, though, are starting to do a mix between the two, almost a hybrid approach, where they're keeping some data in one system and other data in another, just because there's such a big push to move to the cloud these days. And as organizations decide to build out their self-service functionality or their talent management offerings, they're really looking for best-of-breed solutions. And for many people, those they have the best fit with the SuccessFactors solutions. And of course, the integration between SAP on-premise and SuccessFactors is standard delivered, so there's really a very efficient way to exchange data back and forth.
Great, thank you. Erica wants to update the HRIS system but keep payroll as is. Can electric feeds be set up to take HR data and transfer to her current payroll system?
Yes, they can. In fact, depending on which payroll system she's currently using, there may already be automated feeds set up already. So we do have a library of interfaces to third-party systems, including several payroll providers that can be utilized. So depending on your solution, you may find that a feed already exists. And this is a very common setup for several of our customers, that they will send their payroll out to a third party, especially if they already have it up and running and it works well and people are happy with it. We'll just kind of provide the demographic and pay-related data to help them execute the payroll.
Okay. Enrique wants to know, how will it help with the new upcoming efforts HR must undergo to comply with redefining employee types, such as exempt versus non?
The nice thing about the localizations is that SuccessFactors is constantly keeping track of compliance requirements for different locations. So if there happens to be a compliance change, for example, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we in the U.S. changed how we were reporting on veteran statuses. If you were running that particular localization, you received those updates in your solution, and you had the option of whether you wanted to adopt them immediately or wait and adopt them at a better time. So constantly keeping track of compliances for those 77 countries where we do support localization, and then making those updates and making them available as needed.
Okay. I want to let our audience know we do have a number of questions. Probably not going to have time to get to all of them, so somebody will follow up with you over the next few business days. But let's take this one from Thomas. For workflow, does Employee Central use the organizational tables from SAP, or does a separate hierarchy need to be established? Who'd like that?
We can, by virtue of integration between the two systems, use the organizational structure from SAP, but we do actually replicate that within Employee Central. So you don't need to maintain it. That information can feed over automatically and use the values from SAP, but it does get stored on its own within Employee Central.
Okay, and let's take one from Lana. How does the human capital analytics differ from existing SAP BI, business intelligence?
It's more focused specifically on human resources, and then of course it's located in the cloud, whereas BI is an on-premise environment. But the outcome is very similar in that it gives you, interpreted data results. One step further than just extracting data from the system. We do have some customers, however, who are already running BI and will actually create a feed from SuccessFactors into BI and run their consolidated analytical reporting from there. So there are capabilities to do both.
Okay, and let's try to squeeze in one more from Dennis. Will we be able to create our own reports?
Yes, you can. We have a library of standard delivered reports, and then in addition to those, we actually have report building tools that you can utilize within the system. And sometimes when I say that, people roll their eyes because they have in their mind this impression that creating custom reports is, a very involved effort with lots of code and whatnot. But that's just not the case with our tool. We have some guided processes to walk you through creating reports. We click checkboxes. We drag and drop fields onto templates. So from ease of use, it's just a lot simpler to create reports.
Okay, well, thank you. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today's session. So again, if we didn't get to your question during this live broadcast, someone will be able to follow up. Also, for more information, you can refer to this slide here. We want to thank you for attending today's webinar, Simplify and Enhance HR Processes with SAP SuccessFactors Employee Central, hosted by SAP Insider and sponsored by Illumiti. Shortly after this live event, we'll send you an email reminder so you can access this presentation on demand. And on behalf of our guests, Rebecca Murray, Managing Partner with Cultivate Consulting, Inc., and Megan Fife, Education Consultant with SAP Education, we want to thank you for your time and have a great day.